hopefully you'll learn a little bit more about the cloud, how it works, what you can do with it, and some of the services that are available on the cloud, and to help take some of this mystery around this very general purpose term that is used a lot in technology these days called the cloud. Okay, and we'll try and help you. I was very fortunate in my life and my career. I grew up with technology. I had an interest in science and electronics, and played around. I worked for computer companies most of my career, and saw a lot of technology evolve over time. And when you start early with something, it makes it easier to keep up with it than if you kind of jump in all at once. I'm trying to learn Spanish, and after about 206 days of a studying streak on Duolingo, I'm starting to get better. I was listening to some Spanish language paid programming, some ads that are on TV, and I started to understand more of it, but I can't quite always get the meaning, but context helps a little bit. So we'll try and create some context for you with the cloud. Okay, so no one wants to explain it for me, so I guess I'll have to dive in and start explaining it for you. Okay, but that's okay. That's what I'm here for. All right, so let me share my slides here, and I can see you on my gallery here. So if you have a question, raise your hand. You can unmute yourself to speak up. We have time in this class to answer questions, and we're going to try and understand things. Now, the objectives today are to help you understand something. We do what I call two kinds of classes on GetSetUp with technology. Some classes help you understand something, and some classes help show you how to do something. This is not a class to show you how to do something. It's a class to help you understand what the cloud is. And I think for me, and I've been teaching adults technology since about 2007. And one thing I've observed is that adults seem to get better at how to do something if they understand it in the first place. Kids don't necessarily need to understand something. I'm sure you've seen a small child or family member, that's grabbed an iPhone or an iPad, and they seem to be able to figure it out in a matter of seconds. That's because they're not afraid of breaking anything. They're not afraid because, first of all, mom and dad or aunt, uncle, grandma, grandpa are around to help fix it. But if it breaks, they just stop using it and go on to something else. But they'll keep on trying things and experimenting with things until they discover something that it does that they like. Adults don't do that. Our brains actually change their wiring, and we start to understand things like long-term risks and decisions we might make that might impact us in some ways. And that's why car insurance rates are generally more expensive for people that are under the age of 25. And for some magical reason, at the age of 25, insurance rates go down for car insurance because people take more risks when they're younger than we do as adults. And so you're probably, like most people, you're not somebody that likes to click on things or tap on things or install things or do things to change your computer, because you understand you could change something that might break something or cause you not to understand how to do it. So that's a common thing across adults of all ages, of all types, when we're learning. So it's nothing wrong with it. It just means that you're acting as an adult. That's all. Okay, so let's talk about this thing called the cloud. The cloud is made up of computers and cables and wires that connect them all together all over the world. Okay, and we'll talk about where these computers are located and how the cables work to connect them together. But they're just computers that do things. All computers can do things. We have personal computers that do things for us personally, but there are also computers that run things like maps in the cloud, or they run email applications, or they host websites, or they let you stream video and do things like that. So computers are very versatile pieces of technology. They can do a lot of different things, but we tend to use our personal computers for personal tasks, whereas computers in the cloud are usually used for things that people want to get done in the cloud. So, but it's still a computer. It just located somewhere else. Now, the cloud kind of came about as a term because people that would draw computer diagrams on whiteboards and business meetings got tired of drawing a lot of different computers, and they would just draw a cloud on the whiteboard and said, okay, you connect to all these computers. They're all in a cloud. But the cloud was used in business and government for a really long time. It just was really, really expensive. And so if it justified the expense, it was worth it, but it wasn't typically something that companies could make available to consumers at prices that consumers were interested in paying. So as prices came down, the cloud became easier and easier for consumers to get access to. Okay, and that's why we hear and see so much of it now, is because the cost of the technology and the cost to operate it has made it possible for us to use it, sometimes free, sometimes for a fee. We'll talk about how those fees might work. There are these great facilities called data centers. I had the privilege of visiting quite a number of data centers when I worked in the computer industry. They're pretty boring rooms. They just have rows and rows of computers stacked up in shelves, and they have a bunch of lights that are flashing, sometimes, and they're typically full floors of computers, or buildings that are where every floor is filled with computers. Sometimes they're offices, sometimes they're warehouses. And a lot of the things that are underneath are a street, what do they call them? The sewer, they're not sewer lids, but they're the street lids that people open up to get to maintenance underneath the streets. A lot of that underground stuff there is actually wiring that connects data centers together with each other. And that's where it's usually located. Sometimes it's on telephone poles, but sometimes it's just underneath our streets. And people are using those service lids to get to those wires if they need to. They're digging up a street by me almost all the time. And lots of times it's to run wiring and do maintenance or things like that. Companies own these data centers, and they own the computers in the data centers. So the companies that you might think would be pretty popular to own data centers are Apple and Google and Amazon and Microsoft and Facebook and governments and universities and corporations. There's a link I'll include in notes if you want to learn more about data centers. Google explains it in a little bit more technical language than I'd prefer to use in class like this, but they do give you the ability to learn all about Google's data centers. Google, Apple, Amazon, Microsoft, they're big companies. They run big computer networks all over the world, and they own many, many data centers of their own. There are data centers where you can rent space. They're out there. Okay, so there's data centers where you can rent space in a data center. And if you want to run something like a website or an application that people can get to from the web, you can put your own computer in a data center, and the data center will take care of connecting you up to the internet. And you pay them a rental fee for renting space and in their data center. But that's where all the cloud computers exist, is they're in data centers all over the world. I don't know if anybody ever visited a data center. Anybody else ever have a chance to visit one? They're not going to typically let you in because of security reasons. So they're pretty secure facilities, and they usually don't have any sign on the building that says data center, right? And so you may be driving by a warehouse building that looks like any other warehouse in an industrial park, but it might be filled with computers instead of boxes, so you just don't know. They don't really want people to know their data centers because there's a lot of valuable information in them. Now, cables are mostly what's used to connect things to the internet. You might have heard that Elon Musk launched a satellite system that connects people to the internet from the ground. But for the most part, data can move a lot faster, and you can move a lot more of it when you use cables and wires to do it. There's not a map I was able to find anywhere that shows you cables that run underneath the ground in the United States or anywhere, but I was able to find a company that publishes a submarine cable map that shows you where submarine cables are all over the world. And these cables are what connect you from one place in the world to another, and they run underneath the ocean. Many of them are called fiber optic cables now, but there are some that are still copper wires. And so for us in the United States to get to Europe and communicate with Europe over the internet, your message will go from somewhere in the United States over a cable or a wire to maybe New York or New Jersey, and then underneath, that to another location, it'll use one of these cables. And so these cables are all owned by companies, and some of them are private, some of them are public that you can rent space on. But that's how the world and the internet is connected together, is they use these cables to connect them. And they're maintained, they're operated. And so when somebody's running the internet, they've got to make sure that these cables, and there's backup cables. There's usually rare situation where you've only got one cable going to a facility. Some islands might have one cable. So if you look over here, there might be something that's just going out to St. Helena. That's one cable going to that island. But if you look at something that's going across to maybe Latin America or around to South Africa, there are multiple cables, because if one breaks, the internet just uses, another cable. Okay. And it's rare, but sometimes cables are cut by accident. Typically, cables on land are cut more by accident than the undersea cables that I do. And you can they sell maps of these for people that want to get a map and hang it on their wall. You can actually buy a print of this. And so they update it regularly. But that's how all these data centers are connected together, at least from one, shore to another. They're connected by cables that run all over the place. This is a picture, by the way, showing what it looks like for a cable typically coming out of the ocean. And it is typically connected in some kind of building where they take the cable and have a connector that takes it out of these, protective shields. And then they run it over other cables in the land. They connect it to land cables. There's a website I found that has a data center map, and it doesn't have all the data centers, but it has many of them. And these are some examples of publicly available data centers. Now, they typically don't show you where Google or Facebook have data centers, but these are some areas in the country that have data centers. Okay, you can see in like San Francisco, New York, Virginia, they're very high concentration areas of data centers. As you get to more remote areas like Montana, you might not find as many, but that doesn't mean they don't exist. Okay, Portland, Oregon is actually a pretty popular spot for data centers because it's close to power, the Columbia River, and the dams that generate power, and it's a little bit cooler temperature. And so it's easy to build. They call it companies build data centers up in that part of the country. But companies that have data centers, they might put a data center in, say, Portland, Oregon, but they'll also put a copy of that data center in maybe Virginia or Atlanta, Georgia, or somewhere, so that if something happens to one in Portland, not too many natural disasters, but it could be a tsunami. The one in Virginia will have all of the information and a copy of everything, and it'll be able to pick up the work and operate, even if the one data center is destroyed in any way. So companies like Apple and Google and Amazon and Microsoft have multiple data centers that actually have backup copies of things that are normally kept only in one location. They actually keep it in at least 2 locations. But kind of interesting, all the stuff that's out there. There's just a lot of stuff out there that we don't typically see or take for, we don't even know about it, but it's really there. So that's physically where the cloud exists. The cloud exists in the data centers and all the wires and cables that connect them together. And you have a service from an internet service provider or a cellular service provider that connects you to the internet and enables you to communicate with all of these computers that are out there in the cloud. And so that's how you personally take advantage of using all of these facilities. The stuff is out there. Whatever you're doing in the cloud is out there, just that you may not know which particular data center or which particular cables are being used to send and receive things, but it's out there. Okay, so it's easy to, it exists. It's physically there. Any questions about that? A lot of people do a lot of work to put that together and make sure it works properly. And usually it does, which is the nice thing about it. Okay, so one of the things you can do in the cloud is you can store information. The cloud actually is a menu of services that you can utilize. One of those services is storage, so that if you have a computer at home, you can store things on your computer storage device. If you have a smartphone, you can store things on your smartphone. But if you want to, and you have a cloud account with a cloud service, you can store information in the cloud. Okay. There are multiple companies that run cloud services. Amazon runs a cloud service. Microsoft runs a cloud service. Google runs a cloud service, and Apple runs a cloud service. And there are many others besides that, but those are the ones that you will probably come across as a consumer. So when you store something in the cloud, it's like having something stored away from you, right? It's not on your computer. It's not in your pocket. It's in the cloud. So imagine like you actually use the cloud every day, probably. Not 100% people do it, but you probably use the cloud every day when you put money into your bank or savings and loan or wherever you put it. That you take maybe a physical dollar bill or something, and you go to your bank and you deposit it in the bank, and they give you a piece of paper that says you've got $1 in your bank account now, right? Where do they keep that dollar? You don't know. Right? You don't really know, but it's in that bank. And if you want to get it out, you go to that bank and you make a withdrawal, right? But they are essentially keeping your money in an electronic form in their cloud. That you have taken your dollar and you said, okay, I'm going to put it in the cloud. You can get it out with an ATM machine. We generally trust financial institutions in the United States because they are backed by the federal insurance, practices like the FDIC. And so we kind of trust, okay, I'll put my money in the bank. And if I don't physically see it, I still know it's there, right? So you're using the cloud for your money, right? It's just that the money is in a regulated system. Apple and Google and Microsoft and Amazon and others are not regulated, but they're pretty reliable companies, and so you're basically trusting them to store whatever information you want to store in their cloud. Just like you put your money in the bank, you can put it in bank A or bank B. And if you want to make a withdrawal, you got to go to either bank A or bank B. So if you put something and you store it in, say, Apple's cloud, you got to go to Apple to get it out. If you want to get it out, if you put it in Microsoft's cloud, you got to go to Microsoft to get it out. If you want to get it out of Google, you got to go to Google to get it out. So these are like different banks that store information for you. But storage is just one thing that the cloud can do. Okay, so it's just one thing that we take advantage of. We can store information on our computer, or we can store it in the cloud. Okay. Think of the cloud as a master copy of something. I'm going to have a sneeze here in a minute, so hold on. But if cloud, it can be a master copy. Excuse me, sorry about that. When you store something in the cloud, you can get to it by logging into your cloud account, whether you have a cloud with Apple or Microsoft or Google or whatever. And so if you have a phone with you, you can log in to your cloud account with the phone, and you can see and use information that you have in the cloud from your phone. If you log in from your computer, you can do it from your computer. If you log in from your tablet, you can see it from your tablet. What's happening when you have information in the cloud is that the cloud is storing the information, and it's thinking, and it thinks of itself as being the master copy. And when you connect a device to the cloud, it is doing what is called synchronizing the data. So that if you send an email from your phone and you go back to your computer, you can find the email that you sent, because the cloud is updating your computer and it's keeping up to date with what you do on the phone. If you store something and move a file from your computer to the cloud, your phone can see it as well and get to it, or your iPad can do it. So the cloud takes care of keeping things in one place that allows you to connect to it from any device you might want to use, including the web. So that if you lose your iPad or tablet, your computer breaks, or your phone gets lost or damaged, you've still got stuff here in the cloud that is safely kept in the cloud. And all you got to do is get a new phone, and get a new computer, or get a new tablet, or borrow somebody's computer and go to the web, and you can get to things you have in the cloud. That's the advantage of having things in the cloud, is that it's not on any one device. It's actually stored in these data centers that are managed by really, really high quality companies that will keep it safe for you no matter where you are in the world. Each cloud works a little bit differently, and there are many cloud services. So one of the things we talked about was storage. You can store files and information. You can just say, okay, I'm not going to store it on my computer, or I'm going to store it in my computer and I'm going to store it in the cloud. You want to put it in both places. You can have a copy in both places if you want. But you can also use the cloud for backing up your computer. There are services that are included with Apple products that will let you back up to Apple's cloud. There are services with Android devices And there are third-party services that let you back up your whole computer to the cloud so that you have a copy of all of your files safely backed up in their cloud in case you ever lose or your computer gets damaged or stolen in any way. And there are applications that work in the cloud. Your email is probably the most common application that people use that is actually in the cloud, because if you use something like Gmail or Yahoo Mail or Hotmail, your mail is actually stored on their computers where they run their mail systems, and you are looking at a copy of it when you look at it on your computer or your smartphone. And so mail will automatically synchronize. Things like calendars will automatically synchronize. Things like maps we get from computers on the cloud that run maps. I don't know if anybody's bought a paper map recently. I don't know, in the past year, 2 years, 5 years. You may still have paper maps around. Barbara, you have one?
No, I was just going to say, can you buy paper maps anymore?
You can, but they're really expensive now because they know you're desperate if you got to buy one. but you can buy paper maps. But as soon as you buy a paper map, it's out of date, isn't it? It's only as current as when it was printed, right? Whereas we get directions all the time now from Apple or Google or Yahoo or MapQuest or something, and they keep the maps in the cloud. And so when we want to get directions, we tell our application on our device, we're here, we want to go there, figure out the route for me. And that's a computer in the cloud in some data center that is doing that, and it sends back the information to us with the route and how to get there. So you don't think about the fact that that's in the code. The map's not actually on your phone. I mean, you don't have a bunch of files that are maps on your phone or on your computer. You're actually getting them over the internet from a cloud service that the map company that you're using is providing for you. So if you use maps, you've used the cloud. If you use something like Gmail, you've used the cloud. If you use like Google Calendar or Microsoft, Outlook Calendar or any other web calendar, you're using the cloud. So these are applications that are designed to run in the cloud. It's just like when you make an airline reservation, you can actually buy the ticket online and get a copy of the ticket printed out if you want to, but the information about your ticket is stored in the airline's cloud, so that when you go to the gate agent, if you need to check bags, they can look up your ticket from their cloud system. It's not just on your computer, it's on their cloud system. So we really have a lot more experience using the cloud than we think about. And the advantage is that, when you go to check in, they have a copy of your ticket information. They use this thing called a record locator to find you, but typically they can find you now with your name or identification pretty fast too. So what's ever in the cloud, you can get to it as long as you can get an internet connection. If the internet breaks, we're all in a little bit of trouble, but you can still do things the old-fashioned way. I don't know if you ever watch a TV show called NCIS with Mark Harmon, but there was one episode they had. It was a good 8, 9, 10 years ago. They have an episode where they lose all their power and they lose all their internet connection, and he starts pulling out old technology like a mimeograph machine to make copies of things because they can't send faxes anymore, right? So he kind of pulls out a lot of this old technology, and you may remember some of that. I mean, there was the old way of doing things, but then we rely so much on the internet. We have a generation of people that are growing up assuming it's always going to be there as well. Okay, let's talk about some of the different cloud services. Any questions so far? I think you got a better handle on where this cloud stuff is located and how you get to it now. Anybody have any questions about that? Because it's just not in your home. It's just somewhere out on the internet is all. Okay. Apple and Google and Microsoft are probably the three cloud services that most consumers like us use when we use computers. Apple calls their cloud iCloud, okay? And it comes built in as a service when you buy a Mac or when you buy an iPhone or iPad. You can also go to iCloud.com on the web. And you can also download an iCloud application from the Microsoft Store and use some functions on Windows, okay? Apple likes to synchronize everything on iCloud everywhere, so that if you store something in iCloud like a file and you delete it in iCloud, it's deleted everywhere, okay? And so you want to be careful if you delete things when you're using iCloud. If you have a photo and you're using iCloud Photos, and we do a class on iCloud, we do a class on Microsoft OneDrive and Microsoft 365, and we do a class on Google Drive and the Google apps, but each one works a little bit differently. Apple gives you a storage space of 5 gigabytes free, and they charge you 99 cents a month to bump that up to 50 gigabytes. I have like 6,000 photos and 150 videos, and I'm still within 50 gigabytes. And I've been, so I'm not getting close to needing more. Now, Apple is a company. They make a profit for their stockholders. And one of their objectives is to sell more products made by Apple, right? And so they make iPhones, iPads, and Macs work really, really well with iCloud. And they include a lot of applications with those devices that work with iCloud, like their Photos app, or their Pages, which is their word processor, or a Notes app that you might use, or reminders, or and they all typically provide you with email, calendar, and contact information. But Apple's purpose is to make sure that iCloud is something you use, and that they encourage you to buy all Apple products. And some people do that. Some people, decide, I'm using my iPhone a lot, doesn't really work that well with my Windows PC. I'm going to switch over to getting a Mac instead. And then they, do that. And that's their business strategy. And it works. They're a pretty profitable company. If you own stock in them, you probably know that, right? Okay, so that's Apple's iCloud. And we do a how-to class on how to use iCloud, okay? Google has a cloud as well. Google was actually one of the early companies that started offering cloud applications. Gmail all runs in the cloud, okay? But they also have applications like Google Docs, which is their word processor. They have Google Slides. They have a spreadsheet program called Google Sheets, and they have a Photos app called Google Photos. And they have a lot of other apps as well that run in the cloud. Google tends to keep everything you do in the cloud unless you specifically download it to your computer. So if you want to get to something you are using in Google Cloud, like a document or a spreadsheet, unless you have specifically downloaded it to your computer, it will only be in the Google Cloud storage. But you can get to it from your web browser, or there are many apps they have that let you install it on your PC or smartphone as well. And Google makes a lot of products, but they also make sure that the Google Drive and Google Apps work on Apple Macs and Apple iPhones and Apple iPads and on Windows, as well as on Android, which is owned by Google, and Chromebooks, which is owned by Google. Okay, so a lot of people that use Google applications that don't really need much more, they can buy a Chromebook and be very happy. They don't need anything more for their computer. And Chromebooks are typically less expensive than Windows computers. So they built up a lot of business by offering that kind of capability. They give you 15 gigabytes of storage for free, and then you can start paying for it at $1.99 a month. You get 100 gigabytes. But they make all these applications available for you to use for free. And many of you have probably taken classes in them on GetSetUp because they're free applications and they're available, and you store your stuff in Google's cloud storage when you want to use it. So just another service, just another option. Okay. The nice thing about having options is that it makes things more competitive for us to look at and shop with. Okay, so if you are a Microsoft Windows user or you use Microsoft 365, your Windows computer has a really close connection to Microsoft's cloud storage called OneDrive. OneDrive is their storage. Microsoft 365 is a service subscription they have that gives you the full applications like Word and PowerPoint and Excel, but it also gives you a terabyte of storage in OneDrive in the cloud. So you can store a lot of information there when you want to. And Microsoft makes it really easy for you to save your documents that you create in Word and PowerPoint and Excel and other applications that they make in OneDrive, because that's their cloud service and they make the applications. So Microsoft makes these applications and they sell them on Android. They let you install them on Macs and iOS, iPhones and iPads, and use them on the web in addition to Windows. But again, if you are not using these applications very much, you may not find OneDrive very useful for you. But if you're using Google applications a lot, maybe Google is better to use. But they will all do a lot of the same basic things. It's when you get into a little more advanced features, like Microsoft's Photos application is not considered as good as Google Photos or Apple's Photos applications. Apple and Google organize your photos a lot better, and they tend to make it easier for you to find your photos and create albums. Microsoft's Cloud Photos is not that sophisticated. They may improve it at some point, but you'll find typically the Google and Apple are better when it comes to photos. But when it comes to word processing, Microsoft Word is kind of the industry standard around the world. And so you can do things in Microsoft Word that you just can't do in any other word processor. But if you don't do that much, these other clouds are options for you too. It's like opening up an account at a different bank. Which bank is more convenient for you? Which one is closer for you to get to for your branches? Which one has a bigger ATM network? I mean, which one, they don't pay a lot of interest these days, so that's not as much a factor, but which one makes it more convenient for you to use? And so people choose banks, and you should think about clouds as kind of the same type of decision. Which one's going to work better for you? Now, will you end up using more than one cloud? Probably. Depends on what you do. Everybody does something different with their computer. if you have an Android phone and you use Google Docs and Google applications and you don't use anything else, chances are you'll be sticking with Google's cloud. But if you use Microsoft Word or PowerPoint or Excel, you will find that working with Microsoft OneDrive is a lot easier for your cloud storage than using other clouds. If you have an iPhone and a Mac, you will probably find yourself using iCloud to synchronize information between your Mac and your iPhone a lot. So the ability to just say, I only use one cloud is sometimes a challenge. You can concentrate on using more than one, but if you start to use one for a particular purpose like photos and use another one for, say, word processing, then it's easier to keep straight where you've got things. But you might end up using more than one cloud, no matter what you try to do, because it's difficult to say, I'm just going to stick with one, because you probably use some technology from Apple, some technology from Google, and some technology from Microsoft. And so you are splitting your technology, support system across those three companies and using three different services, three different companies, three different sets of applications maybe that might make your life a little more segmented and divided up than if you were just using all technology from one company. Kind of hard to use Microsoft phones because they don't make any. Okay, so chances are you have either an Android or an iPhone phone, and so you're going to be using something with Google or something with Apple, but you can actually download and install Microsoft 365 on Android and iPhones as well. So the strategy is to just make your life a little bit simpler and use the best cloud for the work you are doing at the time. And because they're all going to do a pretty good job. Okay, they're all going to be a pretty good job. And great thing, GetSetUp does classes on all three cloud services. Okay, so the cloud is a big business. You might have heard it on financial news channels or read about it, something. Amazon is actually one of the biggest companies that provides cloud services to other companies. You could start your own cloud and build your own data centers and run your own cables, or you can go to somebody else that already has it built and say, I just want to rent space from you. Okay. And Amazon rents space in their cloud. They call it AWS for Amazon Web Services. And in last year, they made about $51 billion in just cloud services revenue. It's actually more profitable than their retail revenue. But when Amazon was starting to build their retail operation, they figured out, we're building this cloud for ourselves. Maybe we can sell it as a service to other people that need the cloud. And they started doing it. So people like Uber and Instacart and others run their computer systems on Amazon's cloud. It's all over the world. They have data centers they manage. They have their own cables that connect everything together. And so it makes it really easy for a small company, even a single entrepreneur, to open up a business based in the cloud if they want to. Microsoft runs a cloud business they call Azure. They did $56 billion last year in cloud services to companies and other organizations that purchase cloud services from Microsoft. And Google did about $16 billion last year. And they make up about 60% of the cloud services business that's provided. It's growing rapidly. Okay? It's growing at 25 to 30%. This was even before COVID, it was growing. So other technology companies like IBM or Oracle or Dropbox or even Hewlett Packard and Dell have gotten into the cloud business to offer cloud services to their customers and clients. But as consumers, we're going to use clouds that are connected with our consumer products that we use, Apple or Google or Microsoft typically. I mean, now you can buy cloud storage on Amazon. They have a service called Amazon Photos. I think Scott, uses them. And so if you've ever taken a class from Scott Sleek, he can help you understand what it is too. But it's a big business, and it just is continuing to grow because the advantages of using the cloud, particularly for businesses and governments, are making it possible for them to do things that they weren't able to do before. So we've taken a look at the basics of clouds. There really are physical, computers. They exist in physical data centers, and they're connected with cables, and that's how they work. But these computers just are doing things like running maps or running email or running storage for us. And there are some advantages, but you don't have to use a cloud if you don't want to. I mean, you can always keep things on your phone or your computer or on an accessory disk drive that you have connected up to your computer at home. But there are some advantages that maybe you haven't thought about that might be something worth looking into. And depending on what technology you use, it's going to determine which cloud you probably want to learn how to use more than anything else. So let me pause and see if we've done a pretty good job of helping you understand the cloud. Anybody have any questions about things we've talked about with the cloud so far?
It's been really good because that's the first time I've ever actually understood what the cloud was. Nobody's ever explained it.
Of course, well, just use it, right? Yeah, it's like go swim, go swimming. Go and explain what swimming is, right?
Yeah.
Well, thanks, Barbara. Eva, did you have a question?
Yeah, I did. I just wanted to make sure, under what circumstances with me as an individual trying to start my business, but I don't think I would ever get just a cloud. I would probably use the services like I'm doing now, Google. I'm a Google user and a OneDrive, but I wouldn't be buying space unless I was a business, or unless I was a business. Is that right?
Probably. Google has a free level of service for consumers, but they have a paid level of service that anyone can pay for what is called a Google One, which includes support and additional storage capabilities that are available as well with Google. And that's available for people as well as businesses. At GetSetUp, for example, we all use Google for our mail. We all use Google for storing our files and our slide presentations. But that's because the company has decided they want to use Google. Other companies, my son works at a company that uses Microsoft, and they use Microsoft's cloud and OneDrive. So companies with multiple people do that, but individuals can get, when you're using Google Cloud, it doesn't matter whether you're an individual or a company, you get an account with Google, and that's how you access their services.
I see.
Sure. Sure. But yeah, it's they made it easy for people to start for free and grow if they need to or want to. Okay. So that's what they do.
Bob, are you going to comment on safety or at all during this event?
Cloud services are incredibly safe and secure. The reason is that Google and Apple and Microsoft have the best security professionals in the computer industry on their staff. This is a huge multi-billion-dollar business for them. And so they take security very seriously. And the biggest risk from a security standpoint is the individual user that may not have a very strong or secure password. So the stronger and more difficult your password is for people to guess, the more likely your information is going to be secure in the cloud. But they're extremely secure.
Does Google sell my data?
Google doesn't sell your data, but they collect information about what you do on Google, and they use that to create a information that allows advertisers to target ads towards particular kinds of users when they use Google for web browsing. But Google doesn't sell your information. We actually do a class on privacy that helps you understand that. But and Google has a complete privacy page, but they don't actually sell anything that is personal information that you provide them with. Nor does Microsoft or Apple or GetSetUp. Okay, we don't sell any private information.
Interesting.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. We have a question. Will the cloud begin to change someday? Probably. The cloud didn't exist, 50 years ago, and now we're doing Zoom meetings and sharing video with each other online, right? So if you took somebody from 50 years ago and said, "Oh, we're gonna have you join a meeting," and you can join electronically from your computer screen and see everybody else in the meeting all across the country or the world, they'd say, "I don't believe you could do that," right? So who knows what will happen? I mean, the cloud's going to get faster. They're making it easier and easier to use. I don't know if you remember the old days. If you think of something comparable, there probably was a time when you had a camera that used film and you took it to a place where you got the film developed and you got prints and negatives, right? And for a long time, digital cameras were difficult to use, but they got easier and easier and easier to use. And so now we use digital cameras for taking almost all of our pictures instead of film, chemical film. So those are things that are, an example of how technology might change over time, that we do things. And as long as you connect up to the internet, Jerry, as long as you can get an internet connection from your computer or phone to the internet, you can access cloud services because they're all based out on the internet. Okay, so explore some of the other classes now that you understand what the cloud is. Learning how to use a particular one like Google or Microsoft or Apple might make more sense now that you understand what's going on a little bit with the cloud and how it works and functions. And check your email for notes. You'll get links to all of the cloud services that I mentioned, so you can go to their support websites if you want to. Share anything you want to share about GetSetUp on social networks. And if you want to even host your own session, we give people the opportunity to host their own session. You can send an email to help@getsetup.io. Let's see, Annette from the lounge. Well, clouds will start charging you when you reach your storage limit. They don't charge you automatically. They'll tell you you're out of space as soon as you reach the limit of the free storage space they give you for everything you use in the cloud. And then it's up to you to decide if you want to subscribe and pay for cloud storage that they may need to use for you in order to give you that the capacity you need. But they won't automatically start charging you. You'll reach a limit on your free space, and they'll ask you to if you want to buy more storage typically.